a lot of you guys are at, and I just recently got out of back in May. So, definitely something that we want to be conscious of as believers. Like, how do we do this the right way? How do we pursue just healthy relationships in general? That's what this whole series is about. So we started with friendships last week. So Court and I, dream team, tag teaming from both of our perspectives. What does a healthy dating life look like? And so really excited to jump in. We got a dope kind of slideshow, not slideshow. What do we call it? PowerPoint. I haven't used one of these in so long that I don't even know what to call it anymore. So here we go. We got to start with the best. Boom. So everybody, welcome to the table. Welcome to the table where we're going to have real conversations. I hope you're ready because we're going to keep it real. And we want you guys to be engaged with us. We want you guys to ask questions at the end. So where we're going is we're going to talk about who should we be dating? How should we date? How to know when you're ready to date? How to know when you're not ready to date? And then we'll do a little Q&A back and forth of some important questions from our perspectives. And then we want to hear from you guys. We want to know, just the good, bad, and the ugly of the questions that you have. We don't want you to leave without having felt like, you've got something out of this. So with that, the analogy that I love about the table is that the table is our assumptions, right? It's the foundation of everything else that we're going to put on top of it tonight. So my foundational assumption, really all of our foundational assumptions should be the love of God for us. And this is a great verse that we can really refer to. It says, "For God satisfies the thirsty and fills the hungry with good things." So if you're thirsty out there, turn to God, right? You got to turn to God with that thirst and make sure you're going to the right place. And what we really want to do is just say, if you're not in right relationship with God, no matter what we say tonight, it's not going to matter, right? You're going to try to be building on a faulty foundation. You're going to be trying to meet your needs in the arms of somebody and satisfy your soul with them. You're going to cross boundary lines that you shouldn't. And, ultimately it's going to be a train wreck for the relationships that God wants you to have. And He wants us to have healthy relationships. And so we want to make sure that we're building on the right foundation. We got the right table. And most importantly, that we avoid entanglements. No entanglements allowed. This is an entanglement-free zone. So that's where we're going for tonight. And so this is our starting line. Whenever we think about doing something that's meaningful, we should ask a series of questions, I think, that are really going to help guide us and give us just really practical wisdom from the scriptures. Sometimes in life, having the right question is really the right, can save you so much hassle. So I would say when you think about your career, right? When you think about, a hobby, a project you're working on, or when you think about a relationship, you have to ask, what does success look like? How do I know I've arrived, right? How do I know, what am I actually aiming at? And then reverse engineer that. What do I want? Even Jesus asked that. Hey, what do you want me to do for you? And secondly, what is your plan to get there? Okay, I've figured out what I want. I have, articulated this in a way that's meaningful. And then, okay, what are the steps? Who can I learn from? How have other people gotten there? And then how will you know when you've arrived? I think this is a really especially important one when we talk about dating relationships, and so that we avoid this cycle of I don't know, right? Or if you're particularly anxious or prone to overthinking, right? You can really get in on yourself and say, man, I just don't know if this is the right one for me. Well, how do we bring some clarity and some definition to these things to know that when we're winning? Because, play to win, right? We should play the game to win the game. We shouldn't just be out here, running around the field kicking and be like, I guess I'm doing okay. So that's really how we want to just approach relationships in general. And so again, some foundational ideas about relationships. What is a good definition of relationship? Well, relationship is connection that leads to intimacy. So last week we talked about friendship, right? So friends, as you grow with a friend, as you do more things together, as you share your heart with them, you're really going to experience a depth of intimacy, and that friendship is going to grow and grow and grow over time. And that's really what God has for us, right? As we connect with God more, we grow in intimacy with him. As we connect with friends more, we get more intimate, we understand each other, we feel each other's hearts, things like that. And the same thing in relationships. We're going to be focusing on how do I connect in a healthy way with this person? And that inevitably is going to lead to a more intimate relationship. And this is in really, quite honestly, stark contrast with our culture. So our culture is disastrously awful at relationships.
Yep.
And, obviously we know there's some of the statistics on divorce. Over 50% of marriages end in divorce. A lot of people are struggling just to have a healthy dating relationship, let alone even get to marriage and then keep a marriage.
Right.
So in our world, our culture is really defined by consumption, right? And consumption is, you make me feel good. And so consumption always leads to the destruction of the object. And this is why when we approach dating and we approach relationships with a consumer mindset, it's just going to be so devastating. And unfortunately, this is kind of in the water, right? This is the air that we breathe. This is even how we think about ourselves, our bodies, our personalities, is with this consumer mindset where we chop somebody up into their different characteristics and try and mix and match until we get the exact one that we like. And we don't see somebody as an individual to be connected with. So I want to give us some contrasts. And I think this will bring some clarity to us for the difference between connection and consumption. So connection asks, how can I get to know this person better? Again, we can talk about God, getting to know God better, getting to know a friend or somebody we're interested in dating. And consumption asks, what am I getting from this person, right? I'm consuming them for a feeling. Connection sees the person as the end goal, and consumption sees the person as a means to the end goal of entertainment, right? I'm around you because you're fun, not because I value you as an individual, as a person. Right. Connection requires two people cooperating, and consumption is one or both people taking from each other. So, if we're going to have a friendship, it's going to be give and take. And, unfortunately, a lot of friendships and relationships are people just using each other. And connection fosters intimacy. Consumption fosters abuse. Connection comes from the heart of God, and consumption, in relationships at least, comes from the heart of the devil. And connection is a stable choice of the will, and consumption is a compulsive neediness. I think that's a really important thing. When I'm pursuing connection, I have the self-control to say, hey, I don't need you, but I want you. I'm choosing you. And there's going to be this symbiotic relationship. One person choosing another, them choosing you back, and then this cycle that starts of deeper and deeper connection. Whereas consumption is, I have this feeling that I'm chasing, and so I need more. We've all had that feeling with Netflix or Instagram or whatever, our vices even. And unfortunately, that carries over into relationships. Yeah. So, Courtney, how do we know when we're not ready for relationships?
Yes. Because, it's okay to admit that you're not ready. So we're going to take some advice from Kevin Hart. You know what I mean? You're not ready. So number one is the politician. So we all know that politicians lie. They talk a lot of talk, but there's a lack of follow through. And so this is indicative of our spiritual maturity. If you talk about Jesus more than you actually spend time with Jesus, that's an issue. Does your public life represent your private life? And if it doesn't, then you're not necessarily ready to pursue a relationship because you're going to be basically lying to that person. Number two is Usain Bolt. So if you don't know who he is a famous Olympic runner. And that means you are running from your past and current hurts or. So if you are someone who lacks confrontation, there's some things that God needs to heal, God needs to restore, and you're just running away from it, allowing the problem to actually fester, then you're not ready to be in a relationship either, because you're going to allow somebody to kind of come into that mess, and you're just going to have an unhealthy relationship, and it's unfair to that person. So there's just some things that we need to deal with as singles before we go and pursue a relationship. Number three is that friend. So everyone has that friend. You might be that friend, and that's okay, because the Lord, again, he sanctifies us. He cleans us up and makes us more like him. But that friend is, for an example, right? You have a friend who comes to you and they're like, hey, I have this problem. You give them advice, and they don't take your advice, and you know exactly how it's going to go, right? All of us have had somebody like that in our lives. And so this represents stubbornness. You're unwilling to make positive changes. You're unwilling to take criticism from people that care for you. And this represents pride. You're just not willing to compromise. And that's definitely not healthy in any type of relationship, let alone a dating one. Number 4 is the loner. So we did talk about friendships last week. And so it's totally okay if you are still in that place of trying to develop those godly friendships. And so, but it's important for us to walk in accountability to have those godly friendships. We're going to touch a little bit about, what does it look like to date and have, mentors, and to have people speaking into that, because your partner cannot be your only friend. That's also not healthy. Number 5 is the parked car. So this is stagnation. You're not really going anywhere. There's a lack of direction. And the thing is, we don't have to have everything figured out right now. You don't have to have your 5-year, 10-year plan right now, but you have to have a little bit of insight into where God is calling you to and where he's taking you to. And so if you don't have that, and you're also pursuing someone else who doesn't have that, you're not going anywhere. Like Billy, you just talked about how, pursuing connection means you're going somewhere with somebody. And if you're not going anywhere, what is actually the point of this relationship? Number 6 is the rear view mirror. This one is pretty obvious, but if you're not over your ex, you probably shouldn't be pursuing a relationship right now, because you're just going to self-medicate. You're going to be actually using this person to heal those wounds that you haven't addressed yet. So it's important to grieve the end of that relationship, allow God to minister to your heart before you pursue another relationship. And then number 7 is you're easy. So I know this has a negative connotation of, you're someone who maybe like sleeps around, but in this, what we're talking about today is that you're kind of a pushover morally. You're willing to compromise. You don't really stand firm in your beliefs. And this can lead to the abuse that consumption can cause.
Definitely.
And it also can lead to you being used and manipulated by another person. So if you're compromising, it's really important to ask yourself, why am I trying to receive admiration from people or from man over how God has affirmed me and who he's called me to be? So it's really important that if you're in that place, you need to solidify some foundations before you pursue a relationship. And last but not least, this was a new word for me. I am not Gen Z, so I thought that the last word was whipped, but apparently not. That's old, but simp is the new word. And that means you fall too easily, okay? Your head is in the clouds. You're like, this about to be bae for life. You're moving a little too fast, okay? Because you're letting this you're allowing yourself to be distracted, and this just demonstrates that you're a little bit more emotionally mature, or immature. And the thing is, it's okay to be attracted to someone. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're just consumed by that, you have an idol, and you probably should allow the Lord to kind of reorder some priorities in your life. So those are just a couple of things that me and Billy came up with that we've seen that maybe we've walked through ourselves. But Billy, can you tell us who can we actually connect with?
Awesome. Just to remind you guys, we're real people, right? We've had real relationships. I didn't just, we're not just talking basic principles. A lot of this is like learned wisdom as well as biblical wisdom. And so when we're talking about the next thing is who to date. This I call it the 4 C's. This is not absolute. This is called wisdom, wisdom from the scripture. And I think it's a good framework. But obviously with all wisdom, you need wisdom to apply it properly. And so it's not like a 4-step process, but my 4 C's are character, chemistry, calling, and confirmation. So we're going to kind of get into the word. And just a disclaimer, the Bible doesn't actually say much about dating, because dating wasn't a thing in the Bible. So if anybody says, hey, this is the biblical model of dating, they're lying to you. So it's just not in there. So what the Bible does say, though, it says a lot about marriage. And so I think what we can do is we can take the principles of marriage and say, hey, this is what we're looking for, and then use the wisdom that the scripture has in terms of biblical principles of how to evaluate character, how to understand friendship chemistry, how to understand your calling in life, and how to understand when God is speaking to you to confirm something to you. Again, this is why it just takes wisdom. In relationships, they always require risk, which is why they can be so difficult, and they can end poorly, and they can be so anxiety inducing. So that's just a disclaimer. And we are going to look at Isaac and Rebekah in the Old Testament. So this, I think, is a great model where we can really draw out some great principles. So basically the backstory is Abraham decides, hey, it's time for Isaac to get married, and he does a pseudo arranged marriage. But the way the narrative plays out, it helps us to really understand what the thought process is as basically Abraham's servant goes and finds a wife for Isaac. And so that's what we're going to kind of take pieces out of. I really encourage you to go check it out for yourself in Genesis 24. And we're going to kind of extract some principles from this passage here. So first is character. Character first and foremost. So what about character? So the first thing that Abraham says to his servant, he says, go to my country and my own relatives and get a wife for my son, Isaac. Man, you got to be on the same page about where you're going. Like, I love this phrase, find a wife and build. When I first heard that, some guy who was up on a stage said, yeah, man, my mindset was, I'm just trying to find a wife and build. Now, not to put too much pressure on a first date or anything, but again, it's just to clarify the goal. Dating is not just about, hey, I feel better about myself, I have some companionship. Hey, I want this to go somewhere, and I'm trying to find somebody that is going to be compatible. I want to respect their time. I want to honor their time and honor them before God. But then also, I want to be pursuing purpose in my own life and not just wasting my time. We don't date because we're bored, right? That's not an honorable thing to do. So we see here, Abraham gives some instructions to his servant. Go find a wife for my relatives. So we're talking, relatives indicates here worship, right? We have the same allegiances. We have the same values and principles that guide our life, because he was surrounded by Canaanites who worship foreign gods. And, if he said, if Isaac marries a Canaanite woman, he's going to end up worshiping their God, and it's going to lead us astray. Abraham's whole family came out of idolatry. He says, I don't want that. We're going to go find somebody who shares those same principles. So then the servant is on his way, and he's figuring out how on earth am I going to find this girl, right? He's like, I'm just going to go back and find this woman. So this is his prayer to God. And we're going to break this down. He says, may it be that when I say to a young woman, please let me drink your jar that I may have a drink. Let down your jar that I may have a drink. And she says, drink, and I will water your camels too. Let her be the one you have chosen for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. Now, what on earth does this mean about character? Well, this servant is going for hundreds of miles through the desert, and camels drink a lot of water. The humps, they hold water. They're literally like canteens. So that they can travel through the desert. So what he's saying is, I want to meet a woman who shows me kindness, hospitality, has a work ethic, cares about the foreigner, won't overlook the small person in life, and somebody that is really gonna is servant-hearted, is hardworking. I mean, all these traits that are showing up here are really important. What happens when you meet somebody who has character? They're trustworthy. Right? That's really what it means to have characters, that you can trust them. And that trust is the foundation for any relationship, whether friendship or romantic relationship. So character cannot be overstated. It's really is, character is who you are when nobody's watching. And who is this person? So some tests: who is this person when you're around them? Who is this person when you're not around them? What do they do with their free time? My wife and I, when we first started dating, before we started dating, she was leading a Christian fellowship over at Penn, the graduate school there. And I didn't care. I don't care what your title is. I know enough about people. And, I know plenty of people who have titles that are Christian, but that means nothing to me. So I did some character references. I got a background check on her, so to speak, socially. I asked around. I was like, hey, is she the real deal? Is she actually who she says she is? And everybody I talked to said, yeah, she's the real deal. So that was a check for me. I said, I'm not going further until I figure out who this woman actually is. And so here's a great passage from Proverbs 31. Again, these principles are unisex, right? So it may be referring to a woman in this case, but these can equally be applied to men. It says, a wife of noble character who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is highly to be praised. And I want you guys to memorize that verse, because you're going to meet some some beautiful people. You're going to meet somebody with a lot of charm, but man, they don't fear God. They don't have the character. They don't have the values that I have. And you got to say, hey, we can be great friends, but we can't go any further than that. Absolutely. It's just, it is what it is, right?
Keeping it right here.
I know who I am, right? Second is chemistry. So again, we're going to start with that, right? You can have plenty of chemistry with somebody, but they're still not the right person for you, right? You could be attracted to somebody. You can be great friends. Oh, we hit it off. But just, again, this is the process of wisdom. Just because you get along doesn't mean you're supposed to date. I think sometimes if you're not used to interacting with the opposite sex, you can't tell friendship chemistry from romantic chemistry. Right. So it's like, oh, I have this connection with this person and it starts to feel emotional. Then you're like, oh, the next step is dating them. You're like, well, not necessarily, right? Mm-hmm. Are we going the same direction? We're going to keep going through this. So it's just important to know that just because you have chemistry doesn't mean you're supposed to date. You could just be great friends. Right. So the woman was very beautiful. And that's important, right? You should be attracted to somebody. It's not the end all be all, but it's on the list. Mm-hmm. You should be attracted to this person. Now, we all got a wide range of what that means. And so just be honest with yourself and don't be too picky. We're trying to connect with somebody, not consume them. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, right. We just got to push back against our culture that way. So, mm-hmm. So basically what happens is there's this proposal that's had, the servant explains the story and to Laban, her brother, and then they have a disagreement about the time frame. And then Laban says this, then they said together, let's call the young woman and ask her about it. So they called Rebecca and asked her, will you go with this man? She said, I will go, she said. So it's very important, right? She's making a conscious decision. And so the heart of chemistry and the heart of friendship and the heart of relationship is mutual choosing. Yeah. I'm choosing to pursue you. You're choosing to pursue me, right? It's a conscious decision of the will. I'm not consuming you. I don't need you, but I want to get to know you. And so that's really where we're going to be at a healthy place, mm-hmm. is this sense of mutual choosing. And for the record, this was written 3,500 years ago, and she had a choice. Just thought I'd point that out. All right. Even if it's an arranged marriage, she had a choice 3,500 years ago. Cool. All right. So calling. Again, this is very important. They chose to do it together, right? She had a choice. They're going the same direction in life now. So calling is about direction, right? You can imagine two lines that cross, right? They spend time together, but they're not going the same direction in life. This is so critically important. Yes. You're going to meet people that that have great character, that you get along with well, but you're not going the same direction. Mm-hmm. And so you shouldn't be dating them, right? You should be realistic and say, hey, we're going to live two different lives. It's not going to work, right? Mm-hmm. One of us is going to have to compromise our calling in order to come along. And so all of you have a sacred call from God. And I don't want to see any of you compromise that just to be in a relationship. I've seen that happen. It never ends well. Mm-hmm. It never, ever, ever ends well. Don't compromise your morals. Don't compromise the call of God in your life. I can't say that strongly enough. Yeah. And again, this comes in with 2 Corinthians, Paul's commandment to the Corinthians. He says, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what does partnership have what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? Right. What accord has Christ with Belial? What portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? What agreement has the temple of God with idols? Right?
Come on, Paul.
I'm going towards God. If you're not going towards God, we can be great friends, but that's all we'll ever be. You got to just have that conviction in your soul. Yes. We got to be going the same direction. Even if you're both Christians, you got to be going the same direction in life. Mm-hmm. If one person's a homebody and the other person is this massive explorer and they plan on physically moving from country to country to country, and this one person just never wants to move, it ain't going to work, right? It's just, you can't skin that cat, right? It's not going to fly. So one of you is going to have to compromise. And now compromise is important on the right things. Some compromise is growth. Mm-hmm. So that's our morals and our relationship with God will guide us in growing in Christ. But we shouldn't be compromising morals anyway, or our calling. Mm-hmm. Another example of that is again, family size. Here, that's an important thing, right? Especially when we're thinking about marriage. If one person says, I never want to have kids, and the other person says, I want to have cheaper by the dozen, then right, it's just not going to work. And you know how one of them is going to have to sacrifice, and what happens when the one person feels violated because they have to sacrifice what they value, right? Yeah. Just be honest with yourself and just don't go there, right? Yeah. As soon as you find that out, you got to cut it, or talk about it, work through it. And now this is an interesting example about calling. I won't go too deep into it, but Priscilla and Aquila, are this power couple in the New Testament. And they basically had this moment where they meet this young, powerful preacher. His name was Apollos. Apollos was like a big dog in the New Testament days. He was up there mentioned with the apostles. He's like next generation after the apostles preaching. And so he's full of passion, but he's got a little bit off in his theology because he hasn't heard about Jesus yet. He's still preaching the baptism of repentance given to John the Baptist. And then this couple, Priscilla and Aquila, in bold here, it says, when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they invited him to their home and explained to him the way of God more adequately, right? That's what happens when you walk in calling with somebody. You become a power couple, and you become a power couple for the kingdom. And so that's what we want to be aiming at. You know, my wife and I, we talked about that when we were dating. We want to be power couple for the kingdom, and I don't want to slow you down, and you don't want to slow me down. So are we in sync together, or do we got to go chase after Jesus in our own lanes? You know, that was a real conversation that we really had to work through. It was not a given. And it was something we talked about up front, not just, you know, kind of at the end, once she had an engagement ring on her finger or something like that. So, and this is not just for people in ministry. This is just Christianity 101. You know, you and your wife or you and your husband should be able to sit somebody down at the dinner table and say, hey, let's talk through it. And the last is confirmation. So the servant, he has this criteria, and he's looking at her, and it says, after she had given him a drink, I'll draw water for your camels too, until they have had enough to drink. So she quickly emptied her jar in the trough, ran back to the well to draw more water, and drew for all his camels. Without saying a word, the man watched her closely to learn whether or not the Lord had made his journey successful. What's important is that this servant here is a third-party observer. He's not Isaac. He's not Rachel. He is a third-party observer. And so what we need is confirmation from God, right? This is his confirmation from God. And it's also an objective perspective. So in my life, I don't make moves in the major things in my life without consulting my mentors, right? I have a group of buddies who are my ride or die brothers, and I have people older than me that I respect. And I've learned the hard way of not taking their advice. You know, yes. Like here we're at the table. We're at the table with family. So I've had several long-term girlfriends, and they didn't work out. Thankfully, they didn't work out. I'm very glad to be with Bianca. I love her with all my heart. And in many ways, I think that God prepared me through those experiences to be the man I am today, to love her better. But one example was when I was in college. I had just become a Christian, and I met this girl from class, and I, you know, kind of hit it off with her. And I told Gabe, Pastor Gabe, who was my mentor at the time, or he was leading our Bible study and mentoring me, discipling me. I was like, hey, you know, I really hit it off with this girl. And he's like, Billy, I just don't think you should be in a relationship right now. And I was like, bet, I'm gonna go do this anyway. Because I figured, I asked her, are you a Christian? And she's like, yeah, I'm a Christian. I was like, that's all I needed. So I'm in. I already like you. So I'll be honest. That was a disaster. It was a year and a half of a train wreck in slow motion that eventually imploded. And I came back to Gabe and had to apologize to him. I was like, you were right. Mm-hmm. I was wrong. Yep. And I'm sorry. Would you please forgive me for doubting you? And, you know, I'll be honest, I learned my lesson. I ran everything through him next time. And, you know, I had another relationship that didn't work out after that. So this is practical wisdom as I've learned through things that didn't work, as well as the scripture here. So thankfully, you know, we're here now. So Amen. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Again, This is not counsel of idiots. You know, you need counsel from people who know what they're talking about. Yes. Counsel from people who have had successful relationships. You know, you can imagine like the blind leading the blind. Man, if you don't have good relationships, what are you doing giving advice? That's called an uninformed opinion. That's stupid. Like get advice from people who are winning in their relationships. So, All right, Court. So now that's the who to date. That was a lot of download right there. Now, how do we date healthy?
Yes. Oh man, that brought me flashbacks.
Not listening to mentors, right?
Yes. Like literally the exact same thing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, my campus minister.
We don't have enough time for all this.
We don't.
We could go for hours.
Yeah, let me just move on. So anyway, yes, how do we actually do this process of connecting and of dating? Well, first, initiating, right? So I know dating apps are really all the rage, and that is one of the ways that you can kind of initiate a conversation and starting to get to know someone. So for my personal experience, I have used one that that did lead to a date, probably back in the fall. Let's say probably October. The thing is, with initiating, you want to be able to connect with someone and do something fun, to be able to get out, to explore, do something that you both enjoy. So for me, we were in Chinatown, got some bubble tea, and we walked around the city because I like to take walks and got to know each other that way. I had a friend who used the app and they went hiking together. So it's important to kind of go out and explore. I think me and Billy had a little bit of disagreement about Netflix. To me, I feel like it wouldn't be a great first date. This in our virtual setting.
We'll save it for the Q&A.
But you want to be able to have a date where you actually are going to be able to talk to each other, and get to know each other. So then that leads to reciprocation. So let's say someone initiates, right, and they demonstrate interest in you. I think it's really important for you to affirm them if you feel the same way. So personally, again, for me, I went on a few dates with someone this time last year. And so we were messaging, and then we had hung out as a group, and then messaged me, and he was like, "Hey, it was fun hanging out as a group. I would like to get to know you one-on-one." And I was like, "Great, it's a date." So I affirmed him by confirming I'm on the same page as you. We can get to know each other. But if you are not interested, it's also important for you to be honest, because you don't want to drag something out and you're in an uncomfortable position because you don't want to go on a date with them, but you're too afraid to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And you're leading this person on, that's not fair. So it's just really important for you to be able to reciprocate, to affirm or to be able to deny, I've unfortunately had to do that. And it was a little awkward. I'll be honest with you. It's not fun, but it shows maturity and respect, when you're able to just communicate how you feel. I'm very excited, for Brittany later. She's going to be talking about conflict and how we can confront. So, stay tuned for that one. Next is pursuing. So you are dating, you're on a date. So it's important for you to be able to get to know this person. Do I have commonalities with this person? Do we share the same morals? If you are on a date with a, non-Christian, you probably shouldn't be on that date. You know what I mean? So it's important for you to be able to kind of assess and get to know their heart, just get to know them. It doesn't have to be all this pressure. You don't need to be thinking about, is this person, the one, am I going to spend the rest of my life with them on a first date? You don't want to be the simp. You don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
You want to be able to remain present during that. Because it's just important, you just don't want to rush ahead. Then there's evaluation. So evaluation actually happens not just on that first date, not just on a couple of dates, but up until you get married. You know what I mean? So that person is not your husband or wife until the ring, you're saying, "I do." So that is something that you continuously do, whether you're 2 months in or whether you're 3 years in, you're constantly evaluating. And so it's important to ask, is there a romantic spark? Am I attracted to this person? Am I attracted to their personality? Are there commonalities? Is there a sense of direction? So I know for me, that was one of the things that made me kind of cut things off with people, because I'm like, I know where God's calling me. I know where he's taking me, and you're still trying to figure it out, which is fine. That is so fine that you are still trying to navigate things. And, we could be great friends. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with walking away, just being friends. So you need to be able to ask those types of questions. But the most important question, honestly, is, are they inspiring you to love Jesus more and become a better person? I mean, that is the most important question, because you just don't want to be walking around with dead weight. You know what I mean? If you want a God-centered relationship and the person isn't pursuing God, again, what's the point? You have to kind of go back to, am I in a consumer mindset, or am I trying to go somewhere? And am I trying to honor God? So it's just really important to ask those questions. And then lastly, what if the answer to all of these questions is no, like we don't connect. This isn't for me. How do you bounce back from that? Well, again, you're still evaluating, right? Like what went wrong? What did I like about this situation? What didn't I like? What lessons can I learn, and how can I just adjust some boundaries in the future? So it is just important this is really just a basic outline kind of how you can connect. There's nuance there. It's going to look a little bit different, but this is kind of like a good outline, some good foundations as you are pursuing the dating life, So I hope that this was helpful for you guys. I just want to go back to, if you're not connecting with God first, then you're not going to have healthy relationships, because they're not going to be honoring. You're not going to be walking in that character if your relationship with God is virtually non-existent or it's touch and go. We want to be able to represent God well in the relationships that we are in, because there's so much brokenness and just destruction that society and culture that we just see today in terms of dating. And I'm just such a big believer that God redeems, right? He can redeem relationships. Healthy marriages can thrive. We can have healthy families. We don't have to continuously deal with generational brokenness. And so it's just so important that we understand that God has called us to steward relationships well. And if we choose to do things his way, his name will be glorified and he will be honored, and we will walk in health, and we will continue to look more like him. And man, the world is looking, they need hope, and we carry it. And so it's just very important that you really do have choices, right? You can choose to do things God's way, or you can choose to do things your own way. And we know how that ends up when we choose to do things that we want to do, follow our flesh. And so I just want to encourage you guys that, hey, there's nothing wrong with not being ready, because when you're walking in community, God can minister to those places in your heart so that you are ready. And I also want to say too, that relationships tend to be idolized as well, just not only just in culture, but even in the Christian world. And I just want to say that you can be whole being single. You can be whole in marriage. There are some people who aren't whole, walking in brokenness, who are in relationships who shouldn't be. And so it's just, I want you to know that you're valued wherever you're at, whatever stage of life you are, that you are affirmed by God. And so it's just important to hold on to that and to stand firm in that. So we are going to move into the Q&A portion. I don't know if you have any last minute thoughts before we move into that.
I just love what you said at the end, right? I don't have to be in a relationship to be whole.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing. Like, live your life.
Yeah.
Like the creator God has placed something on your life that only you can do. Mm-hmm. That's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And like, take that to the logical conclusion. Find somebody who you can run with, or don't waste your time. Mm. Right. And again, we're not setting a bar that's too high. We're just being reasonable here. Right. So again, it just takes wisdom. And that's why I think, like, done with the right counselors and in community, you can find what's healthy, and just don't be in a rush. Mm-hmm. You want the best, not the rest.
Yes,
you just don't want to settle. I didn't get married till I was 28. That was a little bit later than I expected. Right. But that's fine. My parents didn't get married till they were 36. Mm-hmm. That's for generations ago. So, you really want to make sure that you're just walking on God's path and just mm-hmm. go for it. So, we want to hear from you, questions you have. Again, don't pull any punches. Don't hold back. We want to make sure that you guys, we're being practical enough for you guys. Ask us the questions. Our lives are pretty much open books. And so, let's we're going to do some targeted Q&A, me, mm-hmm. Court and I, and then drop your questions in the chat. And, awesome. So first question, Courtney, mm-hmm. and if you don't feel comfortable asking the question in the group chat, private message us, mm-hmm. and that way we'll deal with it as it comes up. So, Courtney, I feel like for a lot of the stereotypes is guys got to ask you out first.
Mhm.
And I know as a guy, that's such a threshold, like it's so intimidating.
Mhm.
So how can a guy ask you out personally
Mhm.
that's both respectful and clear? Like,
Mhm.
what would you prefer?
Yeah, I've actually had this, I'm just like, yeah, this is exactly how I'd want to be approached. So I mentioned someone I went on a couple of dates with last year, and it was somebody that I'd had interactions with before. So if you're a stranger and you're just about to ask somebody out and you've never had any interactions with them, no bueno, you might want to dial it back a little bit. But we had had conversations before. I knew of him, he knew of me, and he was just very clear, and upfront.
What is that language? Like, just give us role play for us.
Yeah. So basically like, hey, I noticed you at church. I know that you serve a lot. I can tell that you have a heart for God, and I just want to get to know you a little bit more. Could we hang out? Boom.
I see you.
Yes.
I see you. Yeah.
That's basically it. Like keeping it just very clear and direct. I don't got time for games. So I don't need to try and discern when you actually mean. Just be upfront and direct. And I feel like that takes a lot of courage for guys, That's why I made that point of just affirming when you're asked out, because that's a lot of courage, because you're risking rejection. So yeah, that's how I would like to be approached.
That's good. That's good. So would you say it's okay then to date within a spiritual community?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So how do we do that the right way then, not the wrong way?
Yeah, well, I mean, you shouldn't.
There's definitely probably a wrong way to do that, right?
Yes, definitely.
Don't be a player. Right?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's important because it can get a little bit dicey when you allow too many people to kind of speak into a relationship, but it's important that those closest to you know, and can give you counsel, people who know you, because we all have blind spots, right? And it's so easy to, again, have our head out in the clouds. But yeah, it is important to walk in spiritual community as you're dating, because
but like you would say it's okay within the same church or campus ministry to date.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Right? Because some people, they feel, I've had this experience with other friends where they're like, yeah, I don't want to muddy the water, because I go to this church, and then what happens if it doesn't work out? Do I have to leave this church? So you've dated somebody.
Yes.
Within,
both in ENC and
and Freedom. So, I met my wife at Freedom. Yeah. So
yes, because I would say I've experienced both sides of that, where it wasn't done correctly or just respectfully. And yeah, I would say that, yes, it is okay. This is where you invite some mentorship. So we are here for you. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to be a player just dating around, asking people out. But I would say yeah, it definitely is. And I feel like us as campus ministers, we'd want to see that. We want to see some ENC marriages up in here. So, but yeah, you just want to be respectful as well, because it can get a little awkward.
I think the key is just respect.
Yeah.
Don't be weird, be respectful. And if it doesn't work out, don't be weird, be kind, right? Be understanding. And I think that's what's really important, is that people are just afraid of the weirdness if they do break up.
Yeah.
Right. Can you honor this person? Can you respect them? Can you treat them the way you would treat your brother or your sister?
Yes.
Which is like, hey, I really want the best for you in Christ. I'm not going to stay bitter. I'm not going to stay in my feelings about it. Right. Didn't work out. Of course, that's an ideal scenario.
Yeah.
If, there's just really nasty people out there, right? There's a lot of dirt bags, men and women. So,
yeah,
that's why it's so important to evaluate character, because, all that glitters is not gold.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
All right.
Cool. I think I'm next, right?
Yeah. And we'll take some of these questions.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So Billy, how can you let someone down, in a way that's respectful, because you don't want to be mean, but you also want to be clear.
Yeah.
So how do we do that?
I think the most important thing is clarity, right? Just being clear with your intentions, being clear with what you feel. So you have to come within yourself and find clarity. You've got to look inside and say, why do I feel this? You do some self-examination and then figure out what you want to say. For me, sometimes it's been helpful to type something up or write it down. This is how I actually feel.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be nervous in the moment with what I'm saying. And so, and then just, the good old sandwich, positive feedback, positive. Say, hey, I've really, yes, Teme, my number one thing is I was so nerve-wracked talking to a woman I liked. I would implode. It was terrible.
That's so interesting.
I know. Yeah.
Opposite.
Paper tiger. So anyway, I think it's just, what was I saying? 10 minutes distracted me.
Oh, you're talking about how to let someone down easily.
Yeah. Just say what you feel. Say what you mean. Hey, I've really enjoyed getting to know you. And then sometimes you can give a reason to help somebody find closure, and just say, I just don't see this going further because, you're a great person, but I don't feel that kind of chemistry.
Right.
And so I want the best for you, but we can be, for now, it's a no for me, or whatever you just say. I don't know, I'm breaking up with you or whatever. I don't know. That's so cliche.
Yeah. I'll just say, hey, I'm just not. If it's an initial thing, because I had to do this. I was like, hey, thank you so much. Thank you that you admire me, but I'm going to have to pass on this one.
How is that better than that's a no for me? I'm going to have to pass. What is he? What is he, a football?
I was trying to be direct and clear, okay?
Yeah. I think the key point is respectful, direct, clear. And you know what? To be honest, if you're being respectful, their response is on them. This is what healthy boundaries are about. And we're getting a lot of questions about boundaries, and this is a huge issue, is knowing what's yours to own and knowing what's theirs to own, and not confusing the two.
Yes.
Right? Like, you own your attitude, you own your actions, you own your words, you own your own bitterness. And so if you stay bitter, that's on you, pal.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you live in unforgiveness, that's on you. And if you're living in unforgiveness, that's on you as well. So you've got to learn how to forgive, even when you've been wrong, even when you've been hurt, and let go of that. So that's just
funny in these chats.
Yeah, everybody's
it's above me now.
It's above me now. Yeah. All right. So let's go back to some of these questions and keep sending them in. I don't think we'll be able to hit all of them, but we'll go through the main ones.
Yeah.
Just a side point. At the end of this series on relationship status, we're going to do a whole week of Q&A. So coming up, some topics are, the next two are confrontation, and then sex and sexual boundaries. What is sex? My wife and I are going to tag team that. And my wife's a doctor, so she talks about this stuff in ways that makes me squirm. She's all medical. Anyway, I don't like it. Okay. So have you guys truly found contentment within your singleness? What does it look like to, and feel like? People often
think content means have no desire.
That's the opposite. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think contentment still, you can still admit and acknowledge that I would like to be married one day. So it's not denying that desire, because that's actually a God-given desire, to be able to want relationship, to want marriage. So I think it's important to actually acknowledge that, because if you deny it and just try to push it away because you're in this space of singleness, then it's going to turn into resentment, honestly, and you're just going to be frustrated. Right? Because you're trying to deny it, and it's popping back up. So it's just important to go to God with this desire and say, like, God, I do desire relationship one day, but I know that I'm in this place of singleness, So for me, like, I am single right now, and I enjoy being single. I'm on my own, I have my own place, and I have like really good friendships, but I also recognize, like, I would love to be married one day. I would love to have children one day. But it's not something that I am completely consumed by. And it's important, again, to be present. It's great to be ambitious and to think about the future, but it's also important to be present. What has God called me to do right now? And so, I think for me, that's led me to being, just to being okay with where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
So
I'd say just being secure. It's going to sound basic, but like, are you a secure person? Do you know who you are? Do you know who God is? Are you walking with him? Be needy with God. I'm so stupid needy with God. I'm just, only God knows my truest, deepest emotions of what I feel and what I bring to him. And so I want him to fill me up. I don't want to leave that time of prayer or a time of fellowship with God where then I'm looking to be satisfied or seen or validated or loved or cherished by somebody else. Because it's not a posture of love, right? I'm going to consume, right? So I do think that we all have most people have a genuine desire to be in a kind of lasting relationship, and that's a God-given thing. So again, I just love this posture of, I don't need you, but I want you.
Yes.
Right. It's so countercultural, but that's such a healthy place to be. God doesn't need us.
Right. Exactly.
God wants us.
Right.
And so when we have agape love, when we have God-sized love for somebody, we can say, hey, I don't need you, but I want you. And then because marriage is, you're binding yourself in a lifelong covenant. You've sworn an oath before God, and you're bound by that. And so, man, I'm just not trying to rush into that. I'm trying to make sure I'm complete as much as I can be before I do that. And so I'd say part of it is just being present with the work that you got to do. Finding, hey, I'm on this planet to do this, to be a great student, to be a great friend, having your emotional needs really met by close friendships too. Again, I think most people just want to be known. And if you don't have good, close friendships, you're going to take that out on, you're going to think that the only way to have that is in a significant other. And so, yeah, just having that security. I'm completely known by God. I have a close group of friendships. I'm present with the work that God has called me to do. And there's seasons, there's just seasons of singleness. Embrace it. Yeah. God's good. He's trying to teach you something. It's probably to be more secure and to get to know him better.
Right. That's good.
Cool. Next question. We got a bunch of questions about boundaries. And then how do you not compromise your values with someone you like? So let's just go through boundaries. How do we set emotional, physical, spiritual boundaries?
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Because I think it is important to recognize that you can share too much too quickly, I guess specifically with emotional boundaries. And so I think physical boundaries, like, I feel like, no, let me not say that it's obvious, because it's probably not, to some people, but I think that there is discernment that's there, because sometimes couples will have a little bit of different boundaries, but if you know that things are going to get too hot too fast, then you want to make sure that you're not crossing lines that that wouldn't be honoring to the Lord. And I think, again, it comes back to respect. Do I respect this person's mind, body, spirit, all of that? Like, do I respect them enough to allow myself to exercise that fruit of the spirit of self-control? Because attraction is there, but we all know, I know we're going to be talking about sex in a few weeks, or next week, maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And it's just important to be able to set boundaries that aren't going to compromise, your walk with the Lord, but also with each other. Because it can be really hard to bounce back when physical boundaries have been crossed. So for some people, they're just not going to kiss at all, because for them, it's kind of like, we might as well just have sex. It's just going to be like, it's just going to go.
If your engine runs hot,
Yeah. Maybe you just need to stick to holding hands. You know what I mean? So your urges and we're just going to be real. What turns you on. You know what I mean? So it's just important for you to recognize that, okay, I can't cross this line, because then I'm going to start thinking this way. I'm going to be lustful, all of that. And that goes both ways for both guys and girls. Do you have any thoughts with spiritual boundaries, or even on physical?
I have less thoughts on spiritual boundaries. I mean, I do actually have a lot of thoughts on this. I have a lot of thoughts on everything. Yeah. I would be slow to say things like, God told me this is my husband, and God told me this is my wife. I have seen that personally end in utter disaster.
Yeah.
If God told you, then you don't have to worry about it. Yeah. It'll happen.
Right.
No need to flex on it. You should never go up to somebody I say never, that's just strong. In the wisdom that God has given me, and I think he's given me the Spirit of God, as Paul says, right?
Amen.
Then you should not be going up to somebody and saying right off the bat, God told me that you're going to be my spouse. That's called spiritual manipulation, if you ask me.
Yeah.
So if it's really from God, it'll happen.
Right.
Take that to the bank. Right. And so sometimes we try and force things. So that's a clear spiritual boundary. Don't try and manipulate somebody even if you think God told you. If God really told you, it's going to happen.
Right.
So just play the cards you're dealt. And focus on growing that connection. Oftentimes you can, when you pray together, it's a really close moment, especially if it's just the two of you, or you're holding hands or kind of snuggling. again, you got to be mindful of that. And, just with all the emotion that gets stirred up there. So I would say, yeah, you set normal boundaries there of just like, hey, yeah, let's pray together. Let's do that. But let's make sure that there's some room for the Holy Ghost or something, the cliche. But, you do want to know, the nice thing is you can't hide your prayer life, right? If you have the Spirit, when somebody else has the Spirit and doesn't have the Spirit. So you can tell when somebody else doesn't know God very well. And so, but when you are with somebody who really knows God, then you're like, oh man, it increases your level of admiration for them. Like they inspire me to pursue Jesus. And that's where you want to be.
Yeah.
In terms of physical boundaries, Matthew 5, we'll talk about this more in 2 weeks. If you lust after somebody, you've committed adultery in your own heart.
Right.
So if something provokes you to lust physically, you shouldn't do it. Flat out.
Yeah.
If they're not your spouse, they're not your husband, they're not your wife, they are your spiritual brother and sister.
Yep.
So what would you do with your spiritual brother and sister? Just be honest. Now that's radically countercultural, but fine. We have to deny ourselves, take up our cross and follow me. So we just got to be comfortable with saying, hey, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. And I won't cross these lines.
Yeah.
So that just, again, comes back to security. Emotional boundaries. I think it's a little bit, I don't know. Everybody's a little different on this.
Yeah. It's hard to have like a hard.
It should be at the appropriate stage of the relationship.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't be an oversharer. Right? If you just started dating, you shouldn't be talking about childhood trauma, right? That's, save those things. Like, I think the thing in relationship is we try to rush it. A healthy relationship gives something time to mature.
Right.
Like think about a flower that you plant. If you dig up the seed all the time, say, is it growing? Is it growing? Is it growing? It's not actually going to grow. So you've got to, plant it, water it, give it sunlight, give it time to grow, breathe a little bit. Because when the emotions are high, I mean, you want to be with somebody, you want to be around them, you want to talk to them, you want that, you crave that level of intimacy. That's fine. But you've got to take a deep breath, pull back, and just say, okay, where are we actually at here? Oh, I've been on 3 dates, or we only dated for 2 months,
Right.
And just stay there. And I say the language that you use. Something that really always gets under my skin is when someone that's dating says us, like, oh, we don't like ice cream. I'm like, what do you mean? It's not we until you get married. It's 2 people, right? You're not one until you're one.
Right.
And so, I mean, be an individual. So I think that's some of the languages you use. Again, boundaries. You shouldn't be sleeping over at each other's houses. Oh, no. That's a no-go. Again, because it's, even if you're not crossing like sexual boundaries, that's, again, it's too intimate. It's too intimate. You're not there, right? That's not the appropriate stage of relationship. So you've got to fight. You've got to be mindful of just the natural draw towards somebody and patience and wisdom. That's fine. Even sexual attraction, that's natural in some level, but you've got to steward that in a way that honors God in that person. That's actually your sex drive is meant to draw you to marriage.
Yeah. Believe
it or not, if you want to have sex, get married. Okay. But so that's how we can kind of make sense of some of this stuff is, in both boundaries, we're not, what do they call that? Like where you deny, like your body is bad, right? We don't believe that.
Yeah.
But we do have healthy boundaries so that we can win a relationship. So that's that.
Yeah. I was going to add a little bit to the emotional too, because I know for me, this happened where a lot was shared too quickly. And then you are now emotionally bonded too quickly, And so, you just don't want to give people more than they deserve yet. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's great. We're going to take 2 more questions. So one says, and then just remember, if we didn't answer your question, drop it even if you had a question tonight, we'd love it if you would just drop it in that form that Brittany posted. That way we can kind of get like a smattering of everybody's questions and get the most important and most common ones put up. So one question is, how do you deal with societal pressures to be in a relationship when you are in environments or social settings where you may feel like everyone around you is with someone but you?
Yeah, I think it's important to come back to a sense of security, right? And recognizing that people are on their own path, and those people might not be happy. They might not even be in happy relationships. They might be ready for one, and I think it's just important to recognize that, all right, God, this is the place that I'm in right now. and I'm surrounded by people who are in a stage that maybe I want to be in. But God, I'm going to choose to trust you, that I don't want to force anything. I don't want to force anything that your hand is not in, like, so it's just very important to come back, to the Lord and say, to receive affirmation from him. Again, it's just so easy to wish we had something when we actually don't know what's going on the other side. It's like social media. You get like, the great pictures, everyone's smiling, but you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So you shouldn't feel pressured, because again, you're still valued, whether you're single or you're in a relationship. So it's just learning that you're valuable in singleness is so important, because you're going to be unhappy in a relationship because you're going to be looking for that person to affirm you when it only comes from God. So, but I feel you. Lots of people are in relationships right now, and it can be hard to not, desire that. So that's real. But it just, again, comes back to, where does my affirmation come from?
Yeah. I'd say, just to add on to that, is guard your heart from jealousy. It's really easy to grow jealous of where you think other people are at, not where they're actually at.
Right.
And that jealousy is a subtle accusation that God's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Reality is God is enough.
Right.
You don't get more of God by being married. And so either God is who he says he is, and he brings fullness of life, and he really does satisfy the hungry and the thirsty with good things, or he doesn't. So you can press into God to receive. And then again, some of us, depending on our temperament, we've just got to be like, listen, we're around a bunch of immature, needy, emotionally stunted people.
Yes.
And so they have terrible perspectives on relationships. And so, again, you get close enough to somebody's relationship, you see this is a train wreck in slow motion. Like, this is awful. So it's easy to grow jealous of something that's not actually that great. Just be you. I mean, like, the reality is, if God is not holding out on you.
Yes, that's so good.
Right. That was the first temptation. The devil came to Eve and said, God is holding out on you. Right. He doesn't want you to be like him. And so we've got to always come back to, God's not holding out on me.
Yeah.
He's not cursing me. He's preparing me. He's preparing me for glory, the weight of glory. So, maybe some guy or maybe some girl is going to be lucky enough to travel with me. Maybe God will bless me with a partner in crime to build his kingdom. But you know what? I am who I am, and I'm okay with that. And I think that is a really healthy place emotionally, that we can then love from deeply. We can, and be on mission, right? If I'm constantly thinking about me, I, my needs, I'm in a consumer mindset.
Yep.
Right? I'm not operating from a place of love where I can really love my neighbor. All right. So last question. And then we're gonna, like I said, make sure to put your questions in the form that Brittany posted, and then we're gonna go into breakout rooms for a time of brief discussion and prayer. And so this question is coming from someone said, recently, I broke up with my boyfriend because I wanted to pursue my relationship with God greater than my romantic relationship. He was a follower of Christ. He was not a follower of Christ, but he respected my relationship with Christ. He also wanted to learn more about Christ, but we both weren't equally yoked. Do you believe that you can help lead someone to Christ even without being equally yoked?
Yeah, as their friend.
Like,
sorry, missionary dating, that's what we call it. It's just, I feel like that's the Christianese word for it. Honestly, I just want to affirm what you did, because that takes a lot. That demonstrates that you want to pursue God more than this relationship. And so it's awesome that he was open, but I think it is important to take that kind of romantic aspect out of it, and be friends. You know what I mean? I think that, this happens a lot. I feel like in the Christian world, and I don't think that's how it's supposed to be. Yeah. So you can lead people to Christ as friends, you know what I mean? But in a relationship, it's just, you want to be on the same page. You want to be growing together. You don't want somebody like 5 steps behind, and you're going forward. It can still be dead weight, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Not to say that your boyfriend was dead weight. I know that's not what you meant, but I think it's important to say. I was just at a practical level. I've seen a lot of friends, students who were former members of ENC
Mhm.
who chose to compromise on their
Yeah.
Christian values, and then they ended up leaving Christ.
Yep.
And for what? For what? For a relationship? That's petty. That's small. That's small peanuts in the kingdom of God. And some of those relationships didn't work out, and they never came back. And so, we've got to realize that we've got to take that just, it's hard, right? If you have an emotional connection, you really care about somebody, I think you can hold those things in tension. I really care about this person. And yet God is, in order for me to grow closer to God, I have to take this step. Those are two simultaneous truths. So hats off to you for doing the right thing.
Yeah, honestly.
And I've almost always seen this end in spiritual disaster for the person.
Yeah.
So I would give the highest level of caution, if not openly say, just don't bother doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody is really interested in pursuing God, they will pursue God without you.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Again, it's a matter of ownership. What's mine is mine, and what's theirs is theirs. I don't have to own their journey with Christ. Again, you can still talk to them at an appropriate level. You can get them, we call it the handoff, right? Oh, have you met I do this to Courtney. Hey, have you met my friend Courtney? Right. So you can get to know her. And if this person is really interested in getting to know Christ, then they're going to engage with them. Right. So, hey, connect them to one of the guys in ENC. You know where to find us. You know where to find me. And if your boyfriend is really interested in pursuing Christ, I'd love to talk to them. And, if they make that decision for themselves, then you know what the best part is? They've made that decision for themselves.
Yes. And not because of you.
Exactly. And so now you can begin to trust that. So now a best case scenario would be you guys are growing independently of each other. And then maybe there's a period of life where God brings your paths back across each other's paths. So, there's a lot of ways these things can play out, but I think that if we honor God, if we put him first in how we choose to live, then we can trust how he guides us on the path. Again, it's just impossible for you to know the future. And if one thing doesn't work out, it's because God has something better for you. So always hold that at the forefront. God always has the best for you.
Amen.